Hello there, fellow peregrinos. Welcome to El Camino de Santiago Pilgrims podcast, where we talk about planning, preparation, packing, tips, tricks, hacks, and all things inspirational to help you on your way to Santiago and beyond. My name is Bradley Chermside. I am the host and I am also the author of The Only Way is West, the best-selling Camino de Santiago memoir, and I have walked the Camino Frances, the French way. I've walked the Camino Portugues, the Portuguese way. I've walked the Camino Ingles, the English way, and I've walked the Camino Finisterre. Enough about me, it is time to get into this week's episode. Lace up your boots, everybody. We're hitting the road. Hi there, fellow peregrinos. Welcome to El Camino de Santiago Pilgrims podcast, episode 99, where I'm going to tell you all about the winter way, the Camino del Invierno, that my wife and I finished walking just last week. I am going to fill you in on all of the following. Some lessons learned along the way that are applicable to any Camino, not just the winter way. I'll talk about a bad experience at an albergue that came recommended in John Brierley's guide. The item I ditched this time that's been with me on every Camino up to now, but won't be any longer. I'll drop a hack that could save you time and money on getting your baggage home too. It was an idea I had while walking, and it ended up saving us a lot of time and hassle as well as money. The places on the winter way I'd recommend to sleep, eat and visit, as well as in Santiago de Compostela itself. Exactly why the Camino del Invierno is now up there as one of my favorite Caminos of all time, if not favorite of all time. I'll share a few enchanting stories from our latest Camino that demonstrates how that famous Camino spirit is still very much alive and kicking. Lastly, I'll drop a few caveats about the winter way and what you really should know about it before you book your tickets. But before I do all of that, a huge, massive thank you to all you lovely pilgrims who bought me coffees since the last episode. Our last podcast guest, Arlene Lasky, was kind enough to buy me 3 coffees. Thank you so much, Arlene. And remember, everybody, to please look up her book, Quest for the Enlightened Pilgrim. You can find it on Amazon. That's Quest for the Enlightened Pilgrim. Thanks also to Chrissy Bergen, who bought me 3 coffees. Chrissy, your support is hugely appreciated. Thanks for all the messages and the info you sent me as well. And thank you so much, Chrissy, for always being in my corner. I really, really do appreciate all your support. It would be remiss of me not to mention Becca, Gina Persil, and Al Engmark, who also bought 3 coffees as well each. So to all of you guys, thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you so much for your support. It really does help motivate me to keep producing this content totally for free for our fellow pilgrims. Now, thanks to all of those who bought those coffees, because I am in Murcia city centre in a pretty plaza down by the river enjoying a coffee, thanks to all of the aforementioned pilgrims. If anyone else would like to support the podcast, just go to buymeacoffee.com/pilgrims podcasts. And that's not the only way you can support the podcast. You could also do so by following us on Instagram and Facebook. Just look for Camino de Santiago Pilgrims podcasts, by liking, sharing and or commenting and on our posts, or simply by just sending a message to say you're enjoying the episodes. It does make me very happy when you all write to say hello. So let's get into it, you lovely bunch, my fellow shellmates, the Camino less travelled, the absolutely jaw-dropping in more ways than one, the winter way. So why do I call it the road less travelled? Well, did you know in 2025 the winter way accounted for just under 1% of the 530,987 pilgrims who registered at the pilgrim office in Santiago de Compostela? So from that figure of more than 500,000, only 440 pilgrims walked it last year, compared with the French way, 242,175, and the Camino's Portuguese routes, 189,000 combined. And that's combined with the central and the coastal. So, the road less travelled, I say it also because for the first 7 days on the Camino Invierno, we did not see one other single pilgrim. The only time we saw other pilgrims was on the final day and the point where we crossed paths with the Camino Sanabres. So for those looking for a quiet Camino, this is definitely one to consider. I should also mention how we got to the starting point. Very simple. We got a train to Madrid from our home in Murcia, and from there took another train to Ponferrada, the starting point, which is also on the Camino Frances, the very popular French way. More than 200,000 pilgrims walked that last year. So you'll need to get to Madrid Chamartín station. The high-speed trains leave from platforms 14 to 19. So this will be a transport hub for many pilgrims walking other caminos starting at various points around Spain. So Madrid Chamartín station could well be the place to catch a connecting train if you're flying into Madrid to get onto Spanish soil. Now then, about those must-see places to eat, sleep and visit on the winter way. On the very top of that list has to be Belisar in Galicia. This is on stage 6 between Monforte de Lemos and Chantada. I was quite unprepared for the stunning views of the lake, the tiered green mountainsides dramatically dropping into it, and the natural beauty decorating the valley rich in vegetation and grapevines. I felt like I'd walked into Austria or Switzerland, a scene from the Sound of Music or something like that, not Spain. It was absolutely mind-blowing. Rachel and I stopped in our tracks and said we didn't want to continue, that we could stop in Belisar and never ever leave. It was just absolutely beautiful. Unfortunately, we had to carry on because we'd already booked accommodation elsewhere further on. But if you can, find some accommodation in Belisar and stop there for the night. At the very least, you should pencil in a drink down on the dock by the river. It's also a good place to rest before tackling an absolute beast of a climb up and out of the valley. While we're still in the Belisar area, about halfway up the mountain from there, a place called Bodega Villa Romana awaits. So why is this special? With your pilgrim's passport, your credencial, they'll give you a free glass of wine from the surrounding vineyards that you can enjoy on some wooden decking where you get even better views of Belisar from up in the clouds. Little shout out to Louise and Christina who came running outside as we passed to let us know. Otherwise, we would have just carried on our merry way. It was the most pleasant surprise after a day of extremely tough trekking, a free glass of wine where we could take in those stunning views. There were some really good municipal albergues that we stayed in too. Villavieja was modern, clean, and a port in the proverbial storm after a really tough climb at the end of a long first day. And when I say modern, I think this albergue had been designed by a pilgrim because every single bunk bed had its own lamp and its own plug socket as well, which, as we all know, is really, really convenient. You will need to take supplies, though, because there's no supermarkets close by. It's a really tiny little hamlet up there, nestled at the top of a mountain. And to book there in Villavieja, you have to email the local town hall. They then reply with an entrance code, and you have to send a picture of your passport, your ID, whatever with that. If you want to know the email address for that, just send me a private message on Facebook or Instagram, and I'll send you the email. You can find it on Google as well. That's how I found it. But if you can't find it, feel free to send me a message and I will send that to you. The price was €10 per person per night for the municipal albergue in Villavieja. Now, the same applies to the municipal albergue in Villamartin, which I would highly recommend. Lovely location right by the riverside. When we arrived, we got our journals. We went and sat down by the river, wrote our journals, just listened to the stream bubbling past. Absolutely lovely. If you are going to overnight there at the municipal albergue in Villamartin, you do have to take some supplies. There are some amenities in the local town as well, but it is a fair walk away. And there are also cooking facilities, as there are cooking facilities in the albergue at Villa Vieja. So you can take supplies to cook there. We cooked up some pasta and it was quick and easy. So, yes, Villamartin. When you get there, there's a number on the door you have to call. The Hospitalera Maria will give you an entry code over the phone. The price to stay there is €8. They did have some bottled water on site as well for sale, which came in very, very handy because it was Father's Day when we arrived and everything was closed. So, albergue right down by the river, Villamartin, highly recommend that. Now, it was in Villamartin that I ditched an item I'd packed on every single Camino up to now. Unfortunately, me and my poncho fell out of love. My backpack was feeling heavy because of carrying supplies. I estimate with supplies, I probably had about 7 to 8K on my back. And one of the negatives about the winterway is there are long stretches with no provisions, no shops. So you do have to carry food, water and snacks for large parts of this Camino. That is one of the negatives. Something had to go. It was either the poncho or the sleeping bag. I chose the poncho and left it there for someone else who might need it. What did I plan to use instead of the poncho? Well, I already had a waterproof cover for my backpack. I have quick drying combat cut-off trousers and a quick drying waterproof hoodie as well. So I thought, why am I carrying this poncho? It's unnecessary. I had to get rid of some weight from my back. And apart from the sleeping bag, it was the heaviest thing. It was also in Villamartin that we decided to take a train and miss out a couple of stages. Now, why do we do this? I had to reduce our trip because our dog has been very sick. In fact, she's been that ill. We came close to cancelling it altogether. In the end, I thought that maybe we could squeeze 10 days into 8. But once we started and realised how tough each stage was, the stages are long, but also what makes it even longer and exacerbates that is the fact that it's punctuated frequently with some brutal long climbs. It soon became apparent that squeezing 10 days into 8 wouldn't be enjoyable to do so. We'd literally have to walk every minute of every day until we dropped. So if you've only got a week or so, you could do what we did, walk to Villamartin, then take a train to stage 6 at Monforte de Lemos, missing stages 4 and 5. As I said, it wasn't originally our plan, but with my dog so ill and me thinking I could be coming home to a deceased doggy and a traumatized dog sitter, a reduced trip seemed like the best option in the circumstances. The good news is my dog's still hanging in there. So I also want to tell you quickly about some great bars and cafes along the way, including one in Santiago where we had a lovely meal. So eating establishments, should I say, Bajo Cinco, so that's B-A-J-O, Cinco, Bajo Cinco in O Barco. There's a lovely Uruguayan owner called Naya. As soon as we walked through the door, she hit us with a Buen Camino, Peregrinos. And the service was very, very friendly. She gave us a stamp, which is what you always want when you stop for a coffee. And before we left, she insisted we take a shot of some weird concoction that tasted like a mix of Baileys and Sambuca. Now, it was 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'm not the biggest fan of alcohol these days. My first instinct was to say thank you, but no thank you. But I didn't want to deflect the good energy that she was throwing our way. And that's something that Eileen Lasky talked about in the last episode, which is, keeping that good energy going. So it was nice. I'll tell you what, it gave me a little bit of birdies flying around my head for the next 10 minutes, but lots of character, the owner, Naya, and really, really friendly. And the coffee was really, really good as well. So Bajo Cinco in El Barco. Stop there. Now, in a place called Chantada, that is on stage 6, there's a place called Capital Cafe, and we got 4 really nice coffees and 2 croissants. For how much would you think that would cost you in your own hometown? Just take a moment to think. In my hometown back home, that would probably set me back, I would say, nigh on 20 quid. Here, it cost half that price. It was less than a tenner, about 9.80, something like that. 4 coffees and 2 huge chocolate croissants. And it was really, really nice as well. In a place called Sierra, which is the second last stage, and we ate at a really, really nice place called Bar a Pedra. So that's Bar a Pedra. A-P-E-D-R-A. Bar a Pedra. If you didn't get that the first time, you can just skip back and listen to that. There's a lovely lady called Rosalina that runs that place, and the food was excellent, and she topped it off with a really nice Biscoff cheesecake, which was very, very, very naughty, but very, very, very nice. On the final stage, there was a place called Hostal o Cruzeiro in Ponte Ulla. Hostal o Cruzeiro in Ponte Ulla. Great food. We had a really nice meal. And we got fantastic lodgings, which was our own private room and private bathroom for just 33 euros. So highly recommend all of those places. Lastly, in Santiago de Compostela, in a quiet back street with views of the cathedral, we ate at a place called A Fuego Lento. That's A Fuego Lento. The tapas, should I say, was absolutely excellent, and cold beer, warm afternoon, silky as anything. Really, really recommend that place. So why did I fall in love with the Camino del Invierno? Why is it possibly my favorite Camino of all time right now? Well, the first few days from Castilla y León, we were escorted out of Ponferrada and into the countryside by snow-capped mountains. And that's one of the lovely things about walking in spring. You've still got snow on the mountains, and you've got the winter thaw running next to you most of the way. Absolutely lovely. And part of that winter thaw was feeding the whitewater rivers. Waterfalls just came out of nowhere frequently. You'd be walking along, you'd hear the sound of running water, and before you knew it, there was a waterfall just right by you. You could stick your hands in it. It was just absolutely lovely. Stunning countryside, really colourful, spring in full bloom, the butterflies bouncing along all the way with us too. Really, really nice, beautiful, uplifting Camino. It was really quiet. As I mentioned before, we only saw pilgrims on the final day when we crossed paths with the Sanabres. And the Camino spirit is well and truly alive, and the locals so lovely, so friendly, so approachable, so full of life, so inspiring with their good energy and how helpful they were. And I'll get into a few stories about the locals in a moment, which really embody there's everything that's good about the Camino. There was very little roadside walking too, which I really, really liked. If you hit a road, you weren't on the road for long. And I can just remember walking the Camino Portuguese between Lisbon and Porto and thinking, God, this is horrible. I'm just walking along roads. There was points where I had to jump into ditches and to avoid traffic. There was very, very little of that, if none of that. Obviously, I can't speak for days 4 and 5, but it doesn't look like from the guidebook, from John Brierley's excellent guidebook, that there is any of that. So, yeah, very little roadside walking, and waymarks were very, very good too. I really think this Camino was mapped out by someone who had walked many Caminos and knew exactly what they were doing, and were looking at it from the point of view, from the mindset of a pilgrim. So, about those nice stories that embody everything that's good about the Camino, and about why the locals and how the locals were so lovely, friendly and approachable. So there was one day I was walking off into the middle of nowhere. I'd walked past the Camino sign. Rachel had stopped to take some photos, so we got separated a little bit. And I was in a little village, and I started walking off, as you do, kind of lost in your thoughts. And someone shouted out their window. An old lady shouted out of her window, "Peregrino, por aquí, por aquí," which is pretty much pilgrim, this way. You've gone the wrong way. I mean, she didn't have to do that. She could have just watched me walk off into the middle of nowhere. It might have been quite funny for her. But no, she was actually really, really nice. And yeah, just really nice to know that the locals have got your back. So anyone that's walking on your own, you're going to have a support network out there in the shape of the locals. There was a moment where we're about 3 kilometers from a town. It was the end of the day. The sun was coming down. And there was a farmer on the back of a tractor who shouted to us, "Only a little bit to go. Keep going, guys. Keep going, guys." You know, he didn't have to do that. And I just thought, you know, these are such magical moments. And I found myself feeling so grateful in these turbulent times to be experiencing such moments of peace. This episode is sponsored by my Camino de Santiago best-selling memoir, The Only Way is West. One of the latest 5-star reviews goes a little something like this. Reviewed by Mel in the United Kingdom. I absolutely loved it. It was refreshing and entertaining in the way it was written. I was Googling the places he stopped at and the towns and villages he walked along the way. It almost made me want to walk the Camino de Santiago myself. Then I poured a glass of wine and read some more. Can't blame you for that, Mel. A very well-written book. I'm now going to read his second book, Not From Round Here. So, if you'd like a refreshing and entertaining read about the Camino de Santiago, then look no further. Search on Amazon for The Only Way is West by Bradley Chermside. There was another lovely moment. We were walking out of Shantala early morning, and there was an older lady. And as we walked past, she came out of a bakery. She saw us both. She put her hands into a prayer pose, bowed, and said, "Buen camino, peregrinos," which was just so lovely. It's the little things, isn't it? And I was thinking on this Camino about not only is the Camino about rewilding, waking up with the sunset, waking up with the sunrise, going to bed with the sunset, spending all day outdoors, being out amongst nature, being amongst the animals, as you always end up doing on the Camino. I can't tell you how many times I had to stop to let cows go past with their farmers this time. It's also the Spanish, because time has stood still in so many of these places. People are not stuck to their phones. They're out there working in agriculture. They're doing what they do in their fields, doing what they do in their gardens, doing what they do in the grapevines. And it's just a way not only to rewild, but rehuman just what it's like to just speak to people, strangers. There was a really nice moment where I walked past one village, and as I was walking out, there was an older gentleman. He said to me, "Did you manage to fill up with water?" And I said, "Well, no, actually, because I already did so in the previous town." He said, "You made a mistake. You should have filled up here. We've been drinking this water for 60 years, the best water you'll find anywhere." And like I say, it's like time stood still. Someone being proud of their water supply. I just felt that was so, so lovely. And just how the locals interact with you, and they don't have to, they could just let us walk on past, but that Camino spirit, that famous Camino spirit is really alive. And it might be because it is the road less traveled and they're not used to seeing pilgrims. So it's quite a nice treat for them when they do. But whatever the reason, the locals really put some bounce in our boots, spring in our step. And it made me feel really good about living in Spain. It made me feel really grateful to be a British person, being able to live in this wonderful country. And I am just a foreigner, and they just treat me so nice. And in these times of anti-foreigner sentiment, it's just really, really nice to hear. Like, time stood still. They're not affected by what's going on. So, what else was special about the Camino? I mean, I've already mentioned it, those snow-capped mountains, the whitewater rivers, the waterfalls, spring bloom. And one more special moment was when we were walking into Santiago. So just when we thought we'd done all the beastly inclines and hills as we got into Santiago, there was one more to do leading us into the city centre. We just couldn't believe it. It was like a stairway, a vertiginous stairway to heaven. And I even called the Camino a name. I called it a bad name. I won't repeat it. I was like, oh, you absolute beep. I was angry. But anyway, we were walking up the hill, me and Rachel, trudging up the final stretch, tough climb into the city centre. And there was a car at a junction that I gestured to let past. The older gentleman in the car, the old boy in the car, beret on, cigar in his mouth, he gestured for us to pass, which we gratefully accepted. As we did, he wound down his window. Now, he didn't buzz it down because it wasn't an electric window. He wound it down in his old motor, and he insisted that he called me over. He was stopping traffic as well behind him. I felt bad because all the traffic was behind him, but he made a point to make a stop to do this, take time to do this. He pulled out of his pocket a prayer card, a Santiago Apostle prayer card, and he gave it to me. And Rachel was in tears, not only because it had been a tough Camino and she was happy to arrive in Santiago, but because she's a very, very devout Catholic and it meant a lot to her. And because just some old boy had taken the time to give us a prayer card, and I translated it for her as we walked in, and she was in tears as we walked into Santiago. So it was a really, really nice moment, and another example of how choosing to do the Camino, deciding to walk the Camino, is one of the best presents you can ever give to yourself. It gives you a lift, even if you didn't know you needed one. I can honestly say when I went on this Camino, I didn't know I was down in the doldrums, but I really was. I think I've been doing a lot of work, been spending a lot of time staring at my screen, working on my third book. And yeah, it was all work and no play, not a lot of social time because I've been stuck indoors doing this when I wasn't gigging. So yeah, but once I got out into nature, out in the open, interacting with the delightfully enchanting locals, the Camino really lifted me up. So yeah, the Camino has some magic power. I don't know what it is. I wish I could bottle it and take a drink of it every day. Okay, now I did mention a bad experience, and this came in some accommodation that was recommended in John Brierley's Camino Invierno guidebook. I must say the guidebook was excellent. Most of the time, the information was really reliable, and I don't know if there's been an updated version since 2024 when I bought this guidebook, this John Brierley guidebook, but it was a lesson learned. So the accommodation was like a squat, and I'd already broken the golden rule of checking accommodation before buying it because it came recommended in the Brierley guide. So I thought, well, it's in the Brierley guide, it must be good. I'd already paid for the meal as well before we came down and ate it, and mine was barely edible. It was cold. Rachel's supposedly vegetarian soup had pieces of meat in it. The owner had obviously just tried to pick the pieces of meat out manually, which was pretty grim. There was no hot water running for the first few hours, but in the end, they did get the hot water running, thankfully. And because, we paid nearly 40 euros for this room, we just expected it to have hot water. Okay, first world problems, granted, but when you pay 40 quid for a room, you do expect to have hot water, and you don't expect it to look like a squat either. And the moral of the story here was, even if it comes recommended by someone, still check it. That's what I learned. And I'm not going to mention the place because that wouldn't be fair on the place. I will just say, please do check your accommodation. You can make draw your own conclusions once you've checked it. And I will also say that we didn't go anywhere else in that particular town because there was nowhere else to stay in that town. We'd already paid our money. We couldn't go anywhere else. So we just had to, it was tough cheese. It was a case of tough cheese. Just say it's only for one night, we'll survive, and that's that. That was one lesson. Here's a few more. So another one would be to carry some water filtration device, some form of water filtration device, because like I said before, there are long stretches where there aren't any supermarkets. There are only water fountains that you can fill up. And many of them, it didn't say if it was drinkable or not drinkable. It was just a water fountain. The way I decided to make my own mind up over that was how it tasted. If it tasted a bit rough, a bit chemically, I didn't fill up. And if it didn't, then I did fill up. I managed to drop in a few electrolyte tablets, which gave it some flavor, which made it more palatable. But I would carry some form of water filtration device on the Camino Invierno, and maybe on another Camino actually, because you don't know when you might run out of water and need to fill up. So that's one thing I learned. And a water filtration device in the form of some tablets wouldn't weigh so much. I also learned the hard way here not to wear black, because even when the sunshine is weaker in springtime and winter, it can still get hot once that sun comes up. So I wouldn't take a black waterproof hoodie like I took with me this time. Something that reflects the sun, not absorbs the sun. Okay, it sounds like I'm teaching you to suck eggs, but I made that mistake. So who's saying someone else wouldn't? Don't carry a poncho for the aforementioned reasons. You can just get a lightweight backpack cover, have a waterproof top. As long as you're with all the materials you're wearing a quick dry, they'll dry where you're walking. Also, for the Camino Invierno specifically, try to make a 14-day itinerary to make it less demanding and more enjoyable, and not have to walk 30 plus K every day. And to boot, you've got lots of inclines that make that 30K even longer for the accumulation ascent. I would also like to mention that Scotch Guard really does work. So Scotch Guard is a spray that I put onto my Skechers running shoes that were not waterproof. Scotch Guard makes them waterproof, or at least I hoped it did. And yes, it bloody well did. There were times when we were walking over cobblestones or terrain where the winter thaw, or the spring thaw, should I say, was actually running on the Camino path, and you had to pretty much splash your way along the Camino. And water did not get into my shoes or make my socks wet. So if you want to take a lightweight running shoe and then waterproof it with Scotch Guard spray, that really does work. Hiking poles. Never used them before. I used Rachel's every now and again, and I have to say I'm converted. It really helps you when you're going uphill to propel you uphill. Really helps you when you're going downhill. By all accounts, it does take some of the force out of your joints as well. I'm converted on using them, and I didn't use them all the time this time because obviously they were Rachel's, but she was trying to convince me to use them. So I did try them out, really liked them. And thank you to the Shell Toucher for sending us those walking pole tips. And look up shelltoucher.com for loads of his merchandise. Shelltoucher.com for lots of his merchandise. And what else? Mistake I made here. If you want to get the bus to Santiago Airport from the city centre, make sure you get it from the train station, because we went out early morning to get a bus to the airport, and I was told I could get it from the city centre. Well, actually, Google told me I could get it from the city centre. AI told me I could get it from the city centre. So I went to the city centre, but it did not come along. And it was only when I hurriedly jumped in a taxi, so I wasn't late for our plane, that, well, I saw a long queue of pilgrims getting onto the airport bus. And that airport bus will cost you between €1 and €3. €1 to €3. I couldn't tell exactly how much it cost this time because I never got on it. It was €1 the last time I did it. €1 last time I did it, but I have a sneaky suspicion it may have gone up a couple of euros. So yes, Airbus 6A, don't get a taxi for 24 quid like we did. You can get a bus, should I say, for around about €1 to €3. Talking of saving cash, what was the travel hack that I mentioned? So as I was walking, I thought, you know what? Why don't I, when I get to Santiago de Compostela, why don't I go to the post office and see if I can send our rucksacks home with the postal service in Spain? And we could. It was a lovely surprise. So instead of having to pay to take our bag on 2 different planes, because I had to get 2 planes home, Santiago, Barcelona to Murcia, I managed to get it sent home for €27 each bag. Now, would have cost more than that to send the bags. Not only would have had to pay more, I would have had to check it in twice, pick it up twice, saved a lot of hassle, didn't have to carry my bag around the airports as well. And 3 days later, it got delivered to my house. Now, I know not everybody lives in Spain. If you do live in Spain, you can do that. But if you live internationally and you're sending it to America or the UK or wherever, the likelihood is probably cheaper and easier to just put it on the plane. But it might be just checking out how much it might be to UPS it home if you're thinking of staying on for a couple of days, visiting Santiago or doing an extra trip somewhere else, and you don't want to carry your pilgrim stuff around with you. You could send it home. It might be worth investigating how much it costs you to send your bag home from Santiago instead of checking it in, having to pick it up and all that kind of stuff. So that was a travel hack that really saved us time, money and hassle. I would also say a lesson learned here was, or a lesson reaffirmed, is that Vaseline on the feet really, really works. No blisters yet again. And I took my socks off halfway through every day, put the Vaseline on the feet again halfway through the day, and I had no blisters, which I was really, really, really happy about. So those are the lessons learned from this Camino, lessons that can be applied to all Caminos. To round up about the winter way, here we go. If you are looking for a quiet Camino studded with snow-capped mountains, waterfalls and riverside walking, this could be the one for you. But really important to take into account, the winter way is not for beginners. There are very many long stretches with no facilities, so there are many days where you have to load up with water and snacks to keep you going. Neither is this a Camino to just go with the flow. It is not abundant with accommodation options. It's not abundant with supermarkets and shops you can stop in or pharmacies along the way. You need to plan your steps, your stops, your accommodation, your itinerary in advance. Highly, highly, highly recommended to do so. Were I to walk the Camino Invierno again, I would, like I said before, set aside 14 days of walking to make it more enjoyable and drink in those stunning views that lifted me up all the way. There was one point where on the second day between Las Medulas and a town called Puente de Domingo Flores, I was walking down the mountain and the snow-capped peaks were extending as far as the eye could see. Mountain tops of different heights, snow-capped peaks. And I was walking down the mountain. There was a waterfall dropping into a whitewater river way down below from our very high up vantage point. The mountainsides were covered in dense forest, and I don't think I've ever seen natural beauty like it. And I just laughed. I don't know why I laughed. I put my hands on my head and laughed as if to say, how is something this beautiful even possible? So grateful for that moment, like I said, in these turbulent times. And I felt so lucky and privileged to be in Spain, a country that's let me live here. Just a moment where my spine shivered. I had goosebumps. The hairs on my arms were on end. And I just was so grateful for those views and the natural beauty and Mother Nature showing off in front of my eyes. So there were quite a few moments like this on the Camino Invierno where I just laughed at how beautiful it was. The only time I've ever seen beauty rival to that, I think, was when walking from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port to Roncesvalles in the Pyrenees. The walk up in the Pyrenees as you cross the French border. That took my breath away as well. And there's many moments in the Camino Invierno that took my breath away, as did the generosity of the locals, as did just like the charming animals, the goats, the sheep, the cows that just keep you company when there's no one else around. So the Camino Invierno very much gets the thumbs up from me, very much gets the thumbs up from us. If you're looking for a new Camino, then definitely consider this one if you're experienced. Whatever Camino you're going out onto next, I'd like to wish you, every single one of you, buen camino.